How are you? Grudges is not a pleasant subject because the concept of grudges is related to the idea of an infringement and a wrong party, and sometimes multiple perpetrators and wrong parties, which can cause frustration, aggravation, anger, and distress for the victims, and sometimes even violence. The objective of most in society is to function smoothly without impediment and to be productive in our undertakings. Often, our undertakings involve another person and often multiple people. For many reasons, including selfishness, ignorance, and weakness of character, people will infringe upon the rights of others. Sometimes it's unintentional, and other times it is very intentional. In any case, such infringement can cause real harm and can range from light to serious. Life is difficult enough without all these infringements, so no doubt the infringements make things worse. Fact is, they happen all the time, and even the bad ones happen all the time. Why do they happen? There are two fundamental reasons. One is the nature of the flawed human beast, who in its endeavors to plow through life and doing the things that focus on oneself, less focus is put on others. Sometimes this is called a lack of consideration or selfishness, and as a result, transgressions on others occur both intentionally and otherwise. So, fact is that these are mostly preventable, but they do happen. The second type of transgression happens more randomly, like someone dropping a box that lands and breaks someone else's toe. People run into each other accidentally. So whenever a random and unintentional transgression occurs, those who are damaged will assess this and react in certain ways, and that includes both trying to minimize the damage and assigning blame. Minimizing the damage is important because after we have been infringed upon, we attempt to move on with our lives. Thus, it is best to deal with transgressions as conveniently as possible. Problem one is that the result of an infringement can be damage that ranges from seconds to years. Problem two is that the blame can range from totally blameless and random to fully and selfishly intentional. The resulting pain can range from very slight to life damaging. So there's a whole lot of ranges here. The question is, how do we deal with this pain as a result of infringements? Now, I try to be non-religious in my topics, so I'm going to avoid the usual religious argument that instructs us to forgive and forget. But there are cases when following this is indeed beneficial to everyone. In the case when the infringement is an ongoing thing, this might prove difficult. When one enters grudge territory, the person holding the grudge is unsettled and unhappy. Often compensation is desired and revenge is contemplated. Grudges often lead to retribution. So let's first consider the case when the infringement is a one-shot sort of thing. It is a whole lot easier to move on when the damage is relatively insignificant. When the damage is such, it's usually best to move on, even if such damage was intentional. I would consider not moving on if one truly believes that the perpetrator can act to injure again. I think moving on in general is best because when one is consumed with grudges and revenge and retribution, often the harm one has suffered gets worse. Time, energy, and emotion are spent plotting revenge, and most of the time that enhances the harm suffered. In the worst case scenario, exacting revenge gets you into serious trouble. Now, if one really believes that an ongoing infringement is possible, then acting to curb that is appropriate. But sometimes sucking it up and moving on when the action is a one-shot event and or unintentional is really best for yourself and being that route that is worth it. If the infringement is ongoing, it might very well be the only way to end the infringement might be legal remedies. Also, if the damage is severe enough, even if an unintentional or a one-shot event, seeking legal remedies might be appropriate. However, there is a problem that if we are entering the grudge revenge mode, that can occur. Like everything I suggest in all my videos, we must weigh the pros and cons of our actions. In this case, of seeking retribution. In many cases, the act of seeking retribution causes us more damage, and in some cases, it is just simply best to cut one's losses. However, if one decides that one has good reason to act, besides holding a grudge and looking for self-satisfaction through revenge, then one must carefully decide the appropriate course of action. What happens too often is that the injured party holding a grudge will choose a course of action that not only seeks their revenge, but makes himself materially worse off, and that is unfortunate. The price to pay to oneself and others can be severe when one seeks retribution. The goal of life is to live successfully, peacefully, and happily. Intentionally getting oneself into hostile situations, especially because of acting on some grudge and a desire to seek revenge, can be costly to our welfare and that of our families and friends. So before doing so, we must ask, what social good comes of such an act? Yes, stopping a chronic offender would be a good reason, as would be seeking justice for even one heinous action. But too often, the offense is on the minor side, and although quite annoying and inconvenient and troubling, it is often just not worth getting all bent out of shape and indignant, and it might be better to move on. Peace and happiness to you all. Thank you very much.